Hello and welcome to the Squared Circle Psychobabble. My name is Michael Valenti. This is Ralph Valenti. And tonight we're talking about the podcast that recently was released by Lance Storm and his, thoughts on Dave Meltzer saying that wrestling is at its best position right now and it's better than ever. Before we get to that discussion, make sure you hit subscribe and the bell for notifications as we're trying to get to 1,000 YouTube subscribers before the Royal Rumble. So let's explain exactly what happened with this. So Meltzer says that wrestling is at an all-time high right now because of all the great matches that are happening.
Yep.
So what was Lance Storm's reaction to this?
Yeah, so Lance Storm, one, he didn't necessarily agree, and he actually said that Dave Meltzer has kind of lost perspective. He went on to point out that, a lot of the matches today are very good, but he thinks that Dave Meltzer is essentially grading people just on the moves they're doing and maybe not so much on the storytelling. Just because Dave Meltzer might think that this is a 5-star match doesn't necessarily mean it's a 5-star match to everybody. Some people may be into some of the more gimmicky type matches that WWE will do and think that's great. And then I might think that it's terrible because I'm more of a, I prefer more of the wrestling aspect, actual work in the ring.
Now, I thought this was a great time to have this come out because of all the great matches that we had. We had an NXT TakeOver. You had Tommaso Ciampa versus Velveteen Dream. You had Aleister Black versus Johnny Gargano. You had at Survivor Series, Charlotte Flair versus Ronda Rousey. At Evolution, Charlotte Flair versus Becky Lynch. And, like you're saying, there are things that you like and there are things that I like. And I thought this would be a great time to kind of explain to our listeners what we kind of look for in a great wrestling match. What would you say was the all-time greatest match you've ever watched?
Oh, that's tough. I think Hogan and Rock is definitely up there as one of my favorites of all time. Austin and Bret Hart, that's certainly up there.
At WrestleMania 13, you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know if there's one match that I would say. Shawn Michaels, he's had some Undertaker and Shawn Michaels, that's up there. I mean, there's probably a top 5 that I have. I can't say I can put one match ahead of them, but I think if I was forced to pick one, I think Hogan and Rock would probably be at the top.
Now, what about this year?
This year?
So this is November 2018, we're recording this. So
Right.
The best match so far in 2018 with about a month to go.
I tell you what, I really enjoyed the Daniel Bryan Brock Lesnar match. Is that my favorite? I think that may have actually told the best story.
What about Okada Omega 4 at Dominion?
It was a great match, but
I
I think
people like Meltzer are considering that the greatest match of all time. And
it was great. Don't get me wrong, but I mean, I think one of the things that's tough is, and this is the point that Lance Storm made, everybody's comparing, this match was better than this match because of this and that. And it's like, that match was so long ago. I know it was great, but to compare it to like what Daniel Bryan and Brock Lesnar did or anything on NXT TakeOver, it kind of takes away from the match itself. Well, and this was the point he made. Why can't they just be great matches? This was a great match. The Brock Lesnar, Daniel Bryan match was great because of the story it told, and the Okada match and Okada and Kenny Omega match was great because of the story and the lead up into that. They were both great. I can't say that I necessarily enjoyed one versus the other. They were both good for what they were.
Now, one thing that Lance Storm also pointed out was, why does everything have to be like a math equation?
Yeah.
That's the exact wording was, why do these have to be put into a math equation that Kenny Omega versus Okada was a 7-star match? To me, it was a great match. I don't know if it should be the greatest match of all time. I think Meltzer, we all know the reputation Meltzer has, and that if it's not in Japan, he kind of ranks it a little lower.
Yeah, they say he has favoritism towards the matches that happen in Japan.
And maybe he just prefers New Japan Pro Wrestling over WWE. But you have these people that hover on the internet and social media and Reddit, and they, as I like to call them, the mouth-breathing basement dwellers, that kind of praise Meltzer. And it's like, oh my God, if Meltzer gave it a 5-star match, it's got to be an awesome match. And because he doesn't give WWE those many 4.5, 4 3/4, and 5-star matches, that the product stinks. personally, I don't think WWE's product is as bad as people make it out to be. There are times where the storylines kind of go nowhere and they're not consistent, but when they go through and follow through with the storyline, the matches, especially this year, have ended up delivering, in my opinion. You talk about Charlotte Flair versus Becky Lynch at Evolution, I think was one of the best matches of the year.
Yeah.
And part of that was the story going into it, the build to it. Personally, I am like Lance Storm. Can we just get good promos? Can we get good storytelling?
Compelling storylines.
You know, and now people want to say Omega is the greatest wrestler of all time. He might be. AJ Styles is the best in WWE. He might be. I personally disagree with that statement because his promo is god-awful. And I can't get invested into an AJ Styles match. He can have a good match, but his builds are just so bad. You
can't become fully invested in it.
Yes.
And that's part of the point too, because as you're saying, all these guys, all right, well, this group thinks that Kenny Omega's great. You might find another group of people that think AJ Styles is great. You'll get people that say Brock Lesnar stinks. It's not that Brock Lesnar stinks. It's that some people just don't prefer that type of wrestling that he does. Now, do all Brock Lesnar matches deliver? No, they don't. But at the same time, his approach to matches is important because when you get somebody like a Daniel Bryan, a smaller guy, then I keep saying this, that can wrestle around Brock Lesnar's style, it can make for a good match and it creates a good storyline throughout that match. It's got like an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. That's how you write a good, effective essay.
Right.
You had Brock Lesnar who came in. You got the suplexes, Suplex City. You heard the fans chanting, same old shit. And guess what happened? Magic happened from that point out because Daniel Bryan gave him the low blow. He hit the knee. You actually thought there was, at some point throughout that match, Daniel Bryan could legitimately win this. It told a good story.
Yes.
But there has to be a build to that character. There has to be some depth to it. You know, all the crap that Brock Lesnar gets, it's like, oh, well, he doesn't care about the industry. He's there for a paycheck. He's there part-time. It all worked to his benefit. They found a way to put that into the match and say, guess what? We're going to make it seem like Brock Lesnar's going to squash this guy, and guess what? We're going to deliver in the ring. And they did.
Right.
It works. You have to have patience. A lot of time people don't have patience to let things develop nowadays. You know, but I prefer a match where you're going to get some good storytelling before the match even happens.
Right.
And I think a lot of people are grading, you know, Dave Meltzer, I think he says, okay, well, this is a 5-star rating just based on what's happening in the ring, not so much the lead into it. Like if you look at, like I said, Shawn Michaels and Undertaker, there was a story that led into that match that helped create that type of environment where the crowd was so invested in it. I think that WWE is lacking in some areas with that type of approach where they don't necessarily do that, but I think they also do a really good job in some occasions. So I'd prefer that approach as opposed to, okay, we're just going to put these two guys in a ring, go have a great match, because it's kind of like, well, I want to be invested in the match.
I agree. Now, one guy that I have been on his bandwagon since after WrestleMania 33, and that is Braun Strowman. Now, is Braun Strowman a great wrestler in ring? Some would say no, some would say yes, but that's also depending on what your thought is on powerhouses. What made Braun Strowman awesome and what makes Braun Strowman so over right now in WWE is the stuff he does in between matches. The flipping over ambulances, the knocking down walls over Kane and Brock Lesnar, the throwing of the porta potty with Kevin Owens in it. He's a very versatile character. While you may not like Braun Strowman when he does the comedic things, I think his comedy delivery is really good. When he was doing the upright bass spot with
Elias.
With Elias, when he did the porta potty spot with Kevin Owens, and he's like, I mean, my falsetto's off right now, so I can't do that, but is anybody in there? Kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Those little things is what makes Braun more of an over character, because it's not just a guy like a Great Khali who's just standing there and he's like, yep, I'm big and tall and strong and I'm going to muscle over everybody. No, he's more humanized. And I know you bash on Braun Strowman for what he does in social media, and I'm not a big fan of it either, but it humanizes him and people can relate to him even though most people can't because of his size. Another guy, Elias, is another guy that's super over right now. I don't even remember the last time he had a match on a pay-per-view, but he's so over right now because of what he does outside the ring. Becky Lynch is so over right now, not because of what she's done in matches. It's what she's doing outside. Her promos, her tweets. She is dominating Twitter right now. That's what I look for. I look more for character. You know what? I don't care if a guy could do a 450 reverse frog splash. I don't care if they could do suicide dives. I don't care if they can, do a V-trigger knee. I don't care. Give me a story to invest in you. That's why guys like Finn Balor, guys like Bobby Roode, guys like
Lashley.
That's why these guys don't get over, and people are like, well, they're just burying another guy, and he was so over in this place, but he's not over here, because you have no reason to care for them. As much as you guys hate Lio Rush, it's brought more heat to Bobby Lashley than ever in both stints with WWE, because you hate Lio Rush so much that you just want him off TV. That's what a character's supposed to do as a heel. It works. That's what Meltzer's missing, I believe. And it's like, well, because there were all these kickouts and near falls and flippy floppy things, I don't care.
Yeah, and when you kind of do that, that formula, it almost exposes the business. Like if you have somebody, that's one of the things. Like, okay, you establish John Cena's attitude adjustment as the ultimate finisher. And then they kick out. The next week, somebody kicks out of it. The next week, they kick out of two of them. Well, why should we now you've now have the fans who cannot actually buy into this move being a finisher.
Well, that's why why Cena was smart enough in doing the sixth move of doom, the lightning fist.
Yeah. Well, I think this actually, going back to what I was talking about with Shawn and Undertaker, that may have been the match that ultimately sparked the, finishers, it's okay to kick out of them to build suspense. Because that's when one of the first times that I can remember where you got the tombstone and the match didn't end. That was where, fans were like, oh my God, this match is great. But now you see that almost weekly on WWE product and New Japan and everywhere else. It's like everyone's so eager to kick out of a finisher where, why even have finishers? But the other thing that they had mentioned in this podcast was, right now, it's the best time to be a wrestling fan because of all the great matches. I don't agree with that. I think that there are a lot of good matches right now, but because of the ability to tell a story and follow a linear path to deliver a good match, I still think the Attitude Era was better. And, some people, and that just proves our point, some people won't agree with that. And that's fine. I've got my opinion. Someone else might have their opinion. That's fine. I do think that right now it's great to be a wrestling fan because there's an alternative and you can stream the WWE network and find all this stuff on the internet. And you didn't necessarily have that when I was growing up. It was kind of like there was WCW, ECW, WWE, and they had their one weekly show. But now I can go on YouTube and watch a match that happens in Japan or Mexico, anywhere else.
Right.
So that aspect of it, that's great, but I don't necessarily agree with the statement that, wrestling is the best it's ever been right now.
Personally, I think the best wrestling has ever been, I think, was the mid 80s to early 90s. Not necessarily the Attitude Era, because while the Attitude Era was great, there were a lot of things that were not great.
Yeah.
And even WWE do not bring it up to the forefront, how they treated women. And it was more like Jerry Springer than actually professional wrestling in some regards. Now, don't get me wrong. What the storytelling between Stone Cold Steve Austin and Vince McMahon, that was great stuff. And you had a DX versus the Corporation. That stuff was good for a while. And the Corporate Ministry was good for a while. There was some great stuff in the Attitude. Don't get me wrong. But I think as they call it in WWE, the Golden Era with Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior and Sergeant Slaughter and those guys. I thought there was better storytelling and builds to things. One, because there were only 4 major pay-per-views at the time. You had WrestleMania, Survivor Series, SummerSlam, and Royal Rumble, and that was it. And they used those to build matches going into them. And you have, let's talk about, like WrestleMania 7. 2 iconic storylines going into that WrestleMania. Sergeant Slaughter turning turncoat against America and becoming an Iraqi sympathizer, and the career-ending match with Randy Savage and the Ultimate Warrior, which was arguably Ultimate Warrior's best match ever. Mostly because of the build going towards it. The Mega Powers exploding. That was 2 years of a build? You don't get that anymore. You don't get those really long-term builds. And yes, Omega and Okada kind of had that.
Tommaso Ciampa and Gargano. You get, those are really it. I know.
Everything else is, we're going to give you a 3-month build, but we're also going to give you that same match 4 or 5 times in that 3 months. That's why AJ versus Shinsuke didn't exactly deliver, because by the time it got to the last man standing match, we saw it so many times we didn't care.
Yeah. Yep.
That's what I loved. And when I watch old pay-per-views, I don't ever really watch the Attitude Era pay-per-views. I'll go watch WrestleMania 6, 7, and 8 ad nauseum more than I'll watch 15, 16, 17, and 18.
Yep.
And everybody loves WrestleMania 17 as the best WrestleMania of all time. Maybe it was, but me, I'll take 8.
Yeah.
I love WrestleMania 8.
And it brings up another interesting point that a lot of people debate. They say, well, compare. Now, I personally think the best wrestling from a storyline perspective, from delivering in the ring, all of that followed through, was the Attitude Era, because it felt like everything had a place, and there was such they put so much attention to detail and everything on like Monday Night Raw, whereas you'll get a couple good segments here and there, but there's a lot of throwaways. Fans nowadays, you'll get people who will say, well, the Attitude Era was better. All they do is high spots now. And we've talked about this in the past. It's like, well, the fans are the ones who decide what they want to see. You'll hear a lot of podcasts where the older wrestlers will complain, well, they're not telling a story. I prefer that they tell a story before the match, throughout the match, etc. But the fans are the ones who decide. If they want to see high spots and flips and 450 splashes and super kick party and all that other crap, they decide that. We don't get to say, this is better because it was just better then. They're the ones that decide what the type of wrestling they want to see.
But here's the big question. What fan are you catering to? WWE does not cater to the diehards. They don't cater.
Exactly.
They don't cater to those fans. They cater to the casual fan, the more of the mainstream media and the entertainment value of it, and not necessarily the wrestling. And you're not going to do that with guys doing flippy floppy things and guys like, as much as you guys like Ricochet, I don't think he would excel in WWE on the main roster because he's too much of a high spot guy. And
we've seen it play out before.
Right.
I mean, look at Sin Cara. He was a guy that could probably do a lot of the same moves a lot of high impact moves, a lot of aerial stuff. They didn't do anything with him. I mean, do I want to think Ricochet could go on the main card and be successful? Of course I do, but it's not just a moveset that's going to get you over. There's plenty of guys out there that can do that moveset.
Right. But a guy like Seth Rollins could get over because he's a character. He's not the best promo in the world, but he at least gets a story over. Where Ricochet, there's still time to tell, and I'm sure he'll be in NXT for, I would think, 6 months to a year before he comes up to the main roster. But a guy like Adam Cole, I think, would be huge in WWE in the main roster because, one, he can deliver a good match. 2, he's a great promo. And 3, they already have a story behind him with the Undisputed Era. He could be a face, he could be a heel, and I think he could work in WWE in the main roster. And this is where you get the question of why does the NXT guys don't make it in the main roster? There's your reason. There's guys that just cannot make the transition because of the different audiences that WWE target.
Yeah. I think NXT does the best job of all the, you've got SmackDown, Raw. I think NXT does the best job of delivering to more of the internet wrestling, community fans, and also being a product that a WWE fan could watch and enjoy.
Well, I think that's kind of their target audience. The mainstream media that is able and willing to subscribe to the network, but you also have the internet wrestling community that this is what they're looking for. Mm-hmm. That's why Tommaso Ciampa and Johnny Gargano works in NXT. Will it work in the main roster? I would think so, but neither one of them are over 200, or I think Tommaso's 210? That screams 205 live if he drops a couple of pounds. But Johnny Gargano, as much as everybody loves Johnny wrestling, something just tells me he's going to be nothing but 205 live talent.
Yeah, I hope that's not the case, but I mean, when you have a guy that's just kind of, I do this for the fans, I do it for the love of the wrestling. I mean, is that not Tommy Dreamer? Is it not very similar to his?
But Tommy Dreamer never made it in the top of the card in WWE.
That's my point. It works in NXT because there's not as many people watch NXT. It's just not as big as WWE. But now when you go to the main roster and you have to appeal to the masses, all the people that watch WWE. I mean, look at a really good example of this is the success that Matt Hardy had with the whole Broken Hardy gimmick. It worked in TNA. It worked in the independents. When they tried to bring it mainstream to Monday Night Raw, even though they didn't really present it the best that they probably could, it never caught on. Mm-hmm. That's meant for a smaller, much smaller type of demographic. Somebody's looking for something very specific. You bring it up now, you got kids, parents. It's somewhere all throughout the arenas that they're selling out. You've got a dad who's bringing his kid there. He's not going to understand what Broken Matt Hardy is. The kid might not get it because they want to see John Cena. They're not there for Broken Matt Hardy. And then eventually you get the diehards who are few and far between at a Monday Night Raw show, maybe.
Right.
That's why it doesn't work.
It works in Raw or SmackDown after a major pay-per-view because that's when they target the internet wrestling community more because they're the ones that are going to dump thousands of dollars in travel packages and go to all 4 shows that weekend. Yeah. That's when it could work. But when you're trying to do it on a weekly basis and the way that Matt Hardy cuts a promo as Broken Matt Hardy, a kid's not going to understand what half the words that Matt Hardy uses. Yeah. Now, it might be educational and make the kid open up a dictionary, but in today's day and age, the kid would have to Google it, and if he doesn't know how to spell the word to begin with, there's no connection there. Yeah. So that's where I think WWE fans and the podcasters that complain that it's a crap product, they forget that because they're thinking as a diehard wrestling fan and not necessarily the 8-year-old, the 10-year-old, or the dad or the mom that are bringing those kids to those shows. Because WWE see a family of 4 that buy 4 tickets as opposed to the one mouth-breathing basement dweller that buys 1 ticket. Yep.
You look at what they do with the New Day. We talked about this. Food fight. Every time there's a major holiday.
My God.
I hate it. I think it stinks. I think those guys are capable of going out there and having matches to get themselves over. But somewhere there is a kid or a parent who thinks, you know what, that was the coolest part of the show. And I think that ultimately at the end of the day, that's Lance Storm's point. It's objective. I may not like it. Somebody else might love it. Just because Dave Meltzer says it's 5 stars doesn't necessarily mean it's 5 stars to everybody. You can't necessarily put a rating on every match. It's whatever the individual fan wants to believe it is. It could be a 5-star match to one person and a 2-star to the other person.
All right. Well, that will end it here for our discussion on what we look for in a wrestling match. Let us know what you think. What makes a perfect wrestling match to you? What kind of fan are you? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure you like our video. Make sure you subscribe and hit the bell for notification as we're trying to get to 1,000 YouTube subscribers before the Royal Rumble. For Ralph Valenti, my name is Michael Valenti. Thank you for listening to the Squared Circle Psychobabble.